Okay. All right, let's do this. Let's have a chat. I feel like it's been a while since I've made a video. I can't even remember exactly which was the last video that I made. Um I think it was about the course, and then I think we did one about the book operation. But I feel like it's been a while since I've come in here to sit down and have a chat with you guys. So today what I wanted to talk about was something that I've spoken about before a couple of times, but I feel like I speak about it in pieces. And so I thought maybe I would explain a little more in depth what happened with my relief from command, which is more accurately stated, my suspension and then relief of command. Um, I woke up this morning and I was messing around, and then I realized, you know what? Uh, Today is October 22nd. And if today is October 22nd, then it is exactly 2 years from the day that I got pulled out of battalion command. So let's talk about that a little bit. Anyway, my point in sharing that is that I wasn't necessarily waiting on today. I didn't even you know, I didn't realize it until after I'd been up for a bit. And then I think I looked at my watch and it said the 22nd. And that's when I realized, okay, today is uh today is exactly 2 years. So anyway, so I got some juice here in this, but this says stay rock solid. So what is rock solid? So rock solid is the name of the battalion. Um you can see that it's got like a little design on it, which is the battalion insignia. Um it's kind of just for irony's sake, thought I'd use it today. Um so rock solid, I'll show this again. So you can see there where it says rock solid and it's spelled RAK. That's because the battalion that I was the commander of was in the brigade that is called the Rockasans. And this like kind of tower back here in the background of this insignia. So you got like a battalion insignia, and then kind of behind it, you got this tower. That tower thing, if you think that it looks kind of maybe Asian culturally, you'd be correct. So the brigade is called the Rockasans. And there's a whole history there, but yes, it does kind of date back to Japan, etc. And that kind of tower emblem is called a torii. So the battalion that I was a part of was the engineer battalion within the brigade that is known as the Rockasans. So since the brigade is known as the Rockasans, the battalion that I commanded was called Rock Solid, RAK, kind of a play on words, which I thought was cool, right? So anyway, there's a whole history with the Rockasans, and the infantry regiment that became the brigade that is now called the Rockasans. It's fascinating history. It's one of the most famous brigades in the entire army. Some might even say that it is the most famous brigade in the entire army. Um, I'm not an infantryman, but I was not an infantryman. I was a combat engineer, but the infantry regiment that became the Rockasans. I mean, there is a very interesting history to go along with that. It does have an interesting legacy, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to command a battalion in the Rockasans, or I really should say why I wanted to command the engineer battalion in the Rockasans. So let's talk about that. Because I mean, it's kind of an interesting story. You probably have to be a little bit familiar with the military, or maybe have some interest in the military to even care about the story. And I will try not to just drone on and on and on and become too long-winded. So I never assumed that I would command a battalion, because commanding a battalion is pretty prestigious. It's very selective, and I didn't necessarily assume that I would ever make it to battalion command. So I can remember the first time that I ever thought seriously about battalion command, like seriously as in I thought that I might make it to battalion command. I was at Fort Drum, New York. I was a major. I already had a couple of eval reports as a major. and they were all very good. Um, but now I was in the 10th Mountain Division, and I got my first eval report. Um, and it was very strong, stronger than I anticipated. I expected to get a good eval report. It was better than I thought. And I remember looking at the wording on this eval and looking at, where I was ranked against my peers. And I just remember thinking, for the first time, I remember thinking, wow, I mean, like, maybe I have a shot at maybe I have a shot at commanding a battalion. Now this was in very late 2014. I wouldn't take command until the summer of 2021. So we're talking years prior. But by this point, I would have already had 11 and a half years in the Army, something like that. But that's kind of how these things build, So how you do as a major, and you're a major for like 7 years. I was a major for 7 years to the day. But generally, how you do as a major, the eval reports you get, etc., determine not just whether or not you're going to get promoted to lieutenant colonel, but then whether or not you're going to be, whether you are going to have a profile that makes you competitive for battalion command. It's one thing to make lieutenant colonel. It's completely different to be a lieutenant colonel that commands a battalion. So I got that eval report and I thought, wow, I never assumed that I would be competitive enough, but maybe if I can kind of, stay on this trajectory, maybe I can do it. So I, continued to do okay as a major. And there are other stories that I could tell. There's one story in particular where I can tell. I'm not going to right now. I think I've told it. No, maybe I've never told it. But anyway, I'm not going to tell it now. But there is one story. There's one particular thing that happened in Korea where I was going to challenge my boss pretty overtly, and I didn't think he was going to react well to it. And I thought, me challenging him, if it changes his opinion of me and derails me from getting a very good eval report, then this could derail me from becoming a battalion commander. And I challenged him anyway, and he got really mad at me. But it didn't change his overall opinion of me. And we actually had a great talk later, and maybe it actually increased his opinion of me. But anyway, I ended up getting a great eval report from him, etc. And I'm not going to tell that story now. That's a story for another day. But my point in even sharing that was, there was a clear moment there with that case in Korea where I made a decision that I thought could have career implications. I knew it wouldn't be enough to get me such an eval report that it would derail my chances of getting promoted to lieutenant colonel. I knew that wasn't necessarily going to happen unless I did something really bad. But I thought it was very likely that it would knock me down just enough that I would no longer be competitive for battalion command. I thought that was quite likely. I'll share that story at some point, but it's actually a great story, but not today. But sometimes I think back on that incident and I think, like, the officer that was willing to do that, the officer that was willing to do what he thought was the right thing, potentially at the cost of, at least part of his career, not his career in toto, but potentially missing out on battalion command, is the officer that later would, give up command because it was the right thing. So sometimes when I look back on my own career, I'm very proud of that moment, the one in Korea with the boss that I alluded to, and very proud of other moments along the way where maybe I built the foundation that ended, with me making the ultimate decision that I did. Now, that's not to say that I got everything right or that I made every decision correctly along the way. No, I mean, there are other decisions that I made that in my career that were not the right decision. And I don't mean like huge mistakes, but I mean, mistakes that I made that were just clearly not right. And someday maybe I'll even share those. But speaking in Korea, so the incident that I was alluding to, the story that I'm not going to share now, that happened in the fall, so the winter of like 2017, 2018, probably very, very early 2018. But let's fast forward. I'm still in Korea. It's 2020. Actually, it's 2019. And I am competing for battalion command. And I am a major, but I've already been selected for promotion to lieutenant colonel. So I'm what we would call a major promotable, which means I'm wearing major rank. But I've already been selected for promotion to lieutenant colonel, but I've not pinned on the rank yet. And that typically will be, that could be anywhere from 6, 8, 9, 12 months or more that you are considered to be in a promotable status, which means you've already been selected for the next rank. You are going to pin on that rank. You got to wait for your number to come up. So I was a major promotable. So I'm competing for battalion command, and I have to list the battalions that I am going to compete for. And I listed the Rock Solid Battalion as the battalion that I wanted. I put that number 1. So how many battalion commanders are there? I don't know, a couple hundred. It's a 2-year assignment, which means each year, half of those battalions are open, and then the next year, the other half will be open, roughly. So ever since I thought it might be possible that I could command a battalion, I always thought to myself, I want to command in the 101st, because I had been in the 10th Mountain Division twice. I was not a jump master. So I was airborne qualified, but I was not a jump master. I had never been in an airborne unit. So I knew that it was unlikely that I would go to the 82nd. But I liked the idea of going to the 101st. And I always wanted to stay in light units. I really like the 18th Airborne Corps, for those of you who understand what that is. So I thought, you know what? The 101st would be a great place to command if I can do it. So I told myself, if I'm going to command in the 101st, there are 3 brigades. Each brigade has an engineer battalion. I'm an engineer, 3 battalions. So of the 3, probably 1 or 2 will be open the year that I would be eligible to go into command. If the engineer battalion that is in 3rd Brigade, which is the Rakkasans, if that one is open, that's the one I'll try to compete for first. So the year that I'm eligible to go into command, which is 2021, that battalion, the Rock Solid Battalion, would be open. Its formal name is the 21st Brigade Engineer Battalion. So it would be open. And then the battalion in 2nd Brigade would also be open. That's called the 39th Brigade Engineer Battalion. So those 2 were open within the 101st. And I put those number 1 and number 2 on my list. So I put the 21st Brigade Engineer Battalion, which is rock solid, the one in 3rd Brigade. I put that first. I put the 39th, which is the battalion in 2nd Brigade. I put that second. And then I put all the other battalions that I was eligible for, under that. You basically, you rank order your battalions by type of battalion, and then within each type of battalion, you kind of enumerate from 1 to N which battalion specifically, you would like rank ordered your preference. All told, I don't know how many battalions I was eligible for. I think it was probably about 80. It was a lot. The engineer battalions, and then the battalions that don't require a specific officer of any specific specialty. You can pretty much be any branch within the Army and be qualified for those. So I was eligible for those. So I had to rank order those 2. So a couple of months go by, I find out, and we had to go compete for battalion command. So I was in the first year group that had to go through what was called BCAP, the Battalion Commander Assessment Program. So from Korea, where I was stationed, I had to fly to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and go through a 4-day assessment, which I actually thought was pretty good. It was the first time that was ever being done. The Army was trying to step up its game in terms of how to select its battalion commanders. So, and that program was actually run by Major General J.P. McGee, who later would command the 101st Airborne Division when I would go into battalion command in the 101st Airborne Division. And so he was my division commander. And, you know, fast forward, he's the officer that relieves me of command. So when I'm at BCAP, the Battalion Commander Assessment Program, you know, I see Major General McGee, because he would brief all the groups that are coming in to compete. You know, seemed like a good enough guy. He had a very strong reputation. And then fast forward, I get selected for command, and I get my number one pick. So I am chosen for the 21st Brigade Engineer Battalion. I find that out in the spring of 2020, and I will take command in the summer of 2021. So I find out maybe 13 or 14 months before I'm going to take command. So in the meantime, I leave Korea, and then I go to Kansas for a year. That's when I go through SAMS, the School of Advanced Military Studies. I'm there for a year. And then from there, I go to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Actually, I mean, this is pretty much where I still live. I still live pretty close to the base. I just live on the Tennessee side. Fort Campbell, Kentucky is, I mean, it's said to be in Kentucky. It basically straddles the state line between Kentucky and Tennessee. So I get here 2 years ago, you know, buy the house that I buy now, or that I live in now, which I knew was a total gamble, because I knew when I got here, this was the most stressful time of my entire Army career. And I've probably alluded to this before, but I'll just say it again. I have never been more stressed than I was I'm going to say the first half of June, or the first, let's just call it June, all of June, you know, roughly, of 2021. And I took command on the 10th. So I showed up about June 1st. I showed up here. It's a long weekend. I guess that's Memorial Day, right? I had graduated from SAMS on May 27th. That's a Thursday. It was a long weekend. I take the long weekend to drive from Kansas to here, and I'm staying in a hotel while I'm looking for a house to buy. And I'm going to, you know, so I show up those first 10 days of June. I'm showing up at the battalion, and I'm in processing, and I'm kind of shadowing the guy that I'm replacing. So the outgoing commander, to kind of learn the job that I'm about ready to take. Right. And I'm wearing a mask, because the policy is, if you're unvaxxed, you got to wear the mask. Now, I don't believe in the mask. You guys all know this, obviously, but I did comply with the policy. Right. So, you know, some things, you know, not everything can be a red line. For me, the shot was a red line. The mask was not a red line. I didn't like it. I didn't believe in it. I did comply. So, you know, you got to understand. So here I am, a lieutenant colonel, and I'm wearing a mask, which means I'm not vaxxed, which means I'm not on the team, but I'm getting ready to take battalion command. So, I mean, you can just imagine the amount of pressure for a new battalion commander that's coming in, that's clearly not going along with like this big push from the entire military. So, I mean, I remember having trouble sleeping those nights, because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, I'm at 18 years. I don't know how I'm going to make it through the next 2 years to make it to 20, which does two things for me. One, it secures my pension, but more importantly, battalion command is a 2-year assignment. So how am I going to survive for 2 years as a battalion commander, when I'm just going to be, I'm going to be looked at as an outsider the entire time. So that's kind of the environment that I'm walking into. So when I bought my house here, I knew it was a huge gamble, because I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to have a job. Like, there's a very good chance that I'm going to be fired, not just from command, but even from the Army. So like I might not have a job, and now I'm going to have this house. I'm going to have a mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. But I bought the house, right? Don't plan for failure. So it's like, okay, well, let's not assume I'm not going to have a job. So, I bought the house. And so on the day I take command, June 10th, I've been in the area for about 10 days. I can remember during the chain of command ceremony. I mean, I knew there's no way I will make it to the change of command ceremony 2 years from now where I hand over a command to my replacement. There's just no way. There's no way. The writing is on the wall. I don't see any way that I'm going to make it 2 years without getting fired. But oh yeah, and this is a super important part to remember. So I was under so much stress those couple of days, not because anybody was doing anything to me, saying anything to me, just the environment that I was going into. How am I going to lead and command a battalion of 500 plus soldiers? And if you count this other company that I have for pure administrative purposes, it's more like 700. When I'm going to be an outsider with my direct boss, the brigade commander, and then my boss 2 levels up, the division commander. Like, how am I going to do this? Not to mention the way that my subordinates are going to feel about me, or the other battalion commanders, my peers. So anyway, I was under such stress that I actually considered going and telling the division commander, hey, I'm not going to take command. Like, this is just going to be too disruptive for everybody. This is me having a notional conversation with the division commander. I'm kind of going through this in my head, right? So, I say to the division commander, hey, sir, let's just be honest. You don't want me to command a battalion. If I'm not going to go along with this policy, you don't want me to command a battalion in your division. Maybe I don't want to command a battalion in your division, and maybe it's too disruptive for the battalion to receive a commander and then have that commander get relieved after they've kind of gotten to know him. And then a new commander comes in and they have to adapt to that new commander. So maybe it's just better if I just don't take command. And so these are kind of the thoughts that were going through in my head those couple of days before what's called taking the colors. So the colors would be like, your battalion flag, for lack of a better term. So before you take the colors, these are kind of the things that are going to my head before I take the colors, which you formally take at the change of command ceremony. And so I was like, oh man, maybe I just don't take command. But then I was like, no, fuck it. And that's exactly what I said to myself. So I was like, no, fuck it. I'm going to make these guys fire a battalion commander. And if they're going to fire me, they're going to fire me, but I'm going to make them. I got myself to battalion command. I earned it. Not that this is all about me, but also I'm the one who's in the right here, not them. And I don't care if I'm the only one. It doesn't matter. And when I say the only one, I mean like the only battalion commander on Fort Campbell. Now I ended up being only one of 2 in the entire army. I didn't know that the situation was that dire at the time. So it's like, no, fuck it. I'm going to make these guys fire a battalion commander, because firing a battalion commander is a lot different than just firing a lieutenant colonel, but anyway, so I'm at the change of command ceremony on June 10th. And in a change of command ceremony, for those of you who aren't in the military, there's a very discrete moment in time in which you become the commander. And that kind of the entire ceremony hinges around one significant rite, if you will. And what that is so for a battalion change of command, so the direct supervisor to battalion commander is the brigade commander. So the brigade commander walks out to the center of the parade field, and on either side of him are the 2 battalion commanders. Okay. So you walk out to the field. And when I say the 2 battalion commanders, I mean the outgoing and the incoming. So you walk out, and then you are met the battalion command sergeant major who comes from the other side. So anyway, so you meet the brigade commander goes out, the battalion command sergeant major comes this way, the two brigade commanders are there, the brigade commanders, I'm sorry, the two battalion commanders, the two battalion commanders, the brigade commander, the two battalion commanders, and the command sergeant major basically form like a little square. I'm not explaining this very well. It's probably hard to visualize. Anyway, the battalion command sergeant major takes the colors and basically passes them around that square. So here's what happens. So the battalion command sergeant major takes the battalion colors and passes them to the outgoing battalion commander. The outgoing battalion commander then passes them to the brigade commander. The brigade commander then passes them to the incoming battalion commander. The incoming battalion commander then passes them back to the command sergeant major. So in passing the colors, you have passed the mantle of command. So what's happening there symbolically is the command sergeant major is passing the colors to the commander. So the command sergeant major kind of takes the colors from the colors bearer, right? Who's just a soldier who kind of carries the colors, but the sergeant major to some degree is kind of the custodian of the colors. He hands them to the battalion commander because in essence they are the battalion commander's colors. So he hands them to the outgoing battalion commander. The outgoing battalion commander then hands the colors to the brigade commander, to his boss, which is basically symbolic of him giving up command, relinquishing command. And then the brigade commander hands the colors to the new incoming battalion commander, which is symbolic of bestowing upon him the command. The incoming commander takes the colors. He is now the commander, and then he hands them back to the command sergeant major to, again, for his custodianship of the colors. So when that happens, that is the discrete moment in time in which the incoming battalion commander is the battalion commander, as of that moment. You receive the colors, you pass the colors, you are now the battalion commander. So right after that happens, and I receive I receive the colors from the brigade commander, I hand them to the battalion command sergeant major, I am now the commander, and then the narrator of the ceremony, reads his spiel, says my name. And then you go and you give a couple of speeches, etc. But anyway, after the passing of the colors, like I am now the commander. They can fire me, but I mean I'm now the commander, which means forever, for the rest of time, I will be able to say that I was a battalion commander, even if they fire me later that day. So I'm standing there on the field. We haven't even come off the field yet. I've literally just received and then passed the colors. And I think to myself, wow, I think to myself two things. One, wow, I'm a battalion commander. This is a huge accomplishment. 18 years in the Army, 4 more years before that at the academy, so this is an accomplishment 20 plus years in the making. And I made it to here, right? But then along with that thought is whatever happens, I'm a battalion commander, and they can take command away from me, but they can never take away the fact that I was a battalion commander. And they're going to have to fire a battalion commander. They're going to have to formally relieve a battalion commander, in order to get rid of me. So anyway, fast forward, I have a great relationship with the brigade commander. Okay, so I don't know that I've ever said his name, but I will. The same with the division commander, who I just mentioned earlier. I haven't really mentioned these guys in public, but I will. I mean, there's no reason not to. And it would take 60 seconds of research to figure out who my brigade commander and division commander were when I was in command. It'd be as easy as just looking up, who was the division commander for the 101st Division between 2021 and 2023. Oh, Major General J.P. McGee. Who was the brigade commander for 3rd Brigade during 2021 to 2023? Oh, Colonel Mark Fedorovich. So those are my two bosses. Um, so my direct boss is Colonel Mark Fedorovich, and then my boss 2 levels up is the division commander, the commander of the entire 101st Airborne Division, Major General J.P. McGee. What's my opinion of these two gentlemen? Mixed. I liked. I'm going to be honest with you. I liked both of them. I actually really liked working for Mark Fedorovich. I really did. If I were to have a conversation with him now, it would be cordial. I would tell him I think he, I mean, he's not the one technically who fired me. And there was no way that even General McGee, who is the one who fired me, there's no way that he was going to get away with not firing me just because of the way the Army was going. However, neither one of those two went to bat for me. And I'll tell you what, I sure as hell have not heard from either one of them since then, despite everything that's come out. No. Are the two of them cowards? Yes, they are. Yes, they're cowards. I don't necessarily have any special animosity towards them because they happen to be the two who brought about the end of my command and my career. That said, I have a higher opinion in terms of my personal interaction with them. I have a higher opinion of Mark Fedorovich than I do J.P. McGee. And I'll tell you why. So, Colonel Fedorovich, who's my boss, who I enjoyed working for as a battalion commander with him as the brigade commander. So a brigade commander has 7 battalions. So he's got 7 battalion commanders. And I tell you, and I've had like no interaction with my peers, but they were all good dudes. Now they're all cowards, all 6 of them. So there were 7 of us, right? The 6 of them, do I think they're cowards? Yes, I think they're cowards. Do I think they went along with this and probably, pushed people out of the military through this unlawful mandate? Yes. Were they hoodwinked in the beginning? Sure. I'm sure they were deceived. But they can't claim ignorance now. No, none of them. They're cowards. And I tell you, they don't reach out to me and talk to me. Which is fine. Even before I started speaking out publicly, only one of them ever really reached out to me. Anyway, so let's back up. So June, I take command. I'm pulled out of command in October. So July of 2021, I've been in command for about a month. So I'm watching the news. We're down in Louisiana. We're doing like a week-long some training down there. It's called the Leader Training Program. It is in anticipation of a month-long training deployment that we're going to do in September. So anyway, so a lot of the battalion and brigade leadership is down there in Louisiana. And this is July. It's like the first week in July, roughly. And I've been in command for about a month. And the writing is on the wall. I had seen something on the news that morning. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was very clear to me that the mandate was coming anytime. So I find my boss in the hallway, Colonel Fedorovich, and I'm like, hey, sir. So right before I took command in June, Colonel Fedorovich was also coming in to take command of the brigade. So he and I are coming into command at the same time. All the battalion commanders are coming in new, and the brigade commander is coming in new. I had shot him an email as we were both coming into command, and I had told him, hey, sir, undoubtedly you've seen me walking around with a mask. I know you're going to get questions about this, so let me just tell you. I'm unvaxxed. I'm not going to take the vax. I know people are going to judge me. I know what this potentially means for my career. I accept that. I acknowledge what that means and I accept it. He responds back and he says, okay, got it. Hey, it's not mandatory. You're good with me. No worries. But just so I know, because yes, people are going to ask, just tell me why. Like, why are you not vaxxed? So I write back and I tell him, hey, this. Anyway, he and I are good, right? It's not mandatory. So, he and I are good. So now fast forward a month, it's now July. The writing's on the wall. Now, of course, the mandate would come out like what was that, August 24th. So this is around July 10th. I've been in command for about a month. So we're 6 weeks from the mandate being implemented, but I can tell that the writing's on the wall. So I find Colonel Fedorovich in the hallway where we're doing this leader training program down in Louisiana for a week or so, and I tell him, "Hey, sir, I know the writing's on the wall. I know this mandate is going to be implemented anytime now, and just so you know, my stance on this has not changed." And he kind of looks at me and he says, "Okay, I hope it doesn't come to that." Which I was appreciative of. I mean, he did not try to change my mind. He knew that I was resolute. But he was expressing his desire that, this would not bring about the end of my career. And I was appreciative of that. Right. Fast forward, the mandate is implemented. And then after the mandate comes out, like 2 weeks later, I'm down in Louisiana. So it's 2 weeks post mandate. The whole brigade deploys down to Louisiana to go through this huge month-long training exercise. We're post mandate. We're going through this like super stressful training exercise. And if I thought I was on borrowed time before, I'm on borrowed time of borrowed time now because we're post mandate. And I'm like, down there in this like super stressful environment, knowing that my command and my career potentially, my command certainly, my career potentially, are going to end anytime. And I'm supposed to be down there, not sleeping and trying to, go through these simulated battles, and just a huge, those training deployments, to what's called the Joint Readiness Training Center, are already so stressful. And then you add on top of that kind of the almost like existential, at least in terms of your command and your career, the existential stress of realizing that you're about to be fired. Anyway, so just, not a great time. I'm trying to like put that out of my mind as I'm like trying to command my battalion, and probably not doing a great job of it. But anyway, afterwards, we are getting ready to redeploy to come back to Fort Campbell. And we got to go through and we have to catalog the names of everyone who is going to formally refuse the shot. So if you, at this point, if you still have not taken the shot, you got to go see your commander, and you have to basically be formally ordered to go take the shot. And then if you refuse, then you have to do two things. One, you go watch this like 3-minute video that I think was from the CDC, this ridiculous animated video that was the most ridiculous thing, just so dumb, but it was supposed to assuage your concerns about the shot. Anybody who had held out at that point and was against the shots was not going to be convinced by this, dumb animated video that was 3 minutes long. But you were supposed to go watch that video. Then you come back to your commander and you say to your commander, "Hey, I'm still a refusal." Your commander orders you again, go take the shot. If you still refuse, then you're sent to go speak to some, medical officer, like maybe your brigade surgeon or whomever. Go speak to that person. You speak to that person, you're supposed to ask them all your questions, and they're supposed to, again, assuage your concerns. Well, if that doesn't work, then you come back and now you've gone through like the wickets of being a refusal, and then you're considered to be a refusal. Now, if you want to submit a religious accommodation request, you can at that time, but in any case, you're considered to be a refusal. So the commander that everyone was going to go see was the company level commander. So the company commander is beneath the battalion. So companies are commanded by captains. That's your first level of formal command. And then then you have multiple companies that are within a battalion. And the battalion is commanded by a lieutenant colonel. The brigade is commanded by a colonel. The division is commanded by a 2-star general. I was the battalion commander. I was the lieutenant colonel. In my battalion, I had 7 companies, all commanded by captains. So the holdouts that I had in my battalion, and I had told my battalion, like, hey, listen, I'm not gonna tell you to either go get the shots or not get the shots. That's up to you. I know what kind of coercion you've received even before it was mandatory. All that stops with me. I'm agnostic as to what you do. This is your decision. If you want to come, if you want to talk to me about it, or you want to ask me my personal opinion on it, I'll tell you. But you gotta come see me personally. I'm not gonna. I am not going to publicly like trounce the Army's policy. But if you come see me in private, one on one, we'll have a conversation about it. So I told my battalion that, and I would have young soldiers come visit me. And you got to remember, young 19, 20-year-old soldiers do not of their own volition go visit the battalion commander, regardless of how cool a guy you think you are, how approachable a commander you think you are. A 19-year-old private does not go visit the old man. But my point in sharing that is that I did have young soldiers who would come see me. My point is that's no small feat for them to go see the battalion commander, come at his office one-on-one, and then share their concerns or ask me my thoughts on it, etc. And I had some great conversations with some of these young soldiers, some of whom were in tears because they liked the Army. This is what they thought they were going to do with their lives. They did not want to take this. They felt pressured. Soldiers who had siblings who had taken the shots and were injured, and just all kinds of craziness. And there's unfortunately, I don't have the power to absolve them of the consequences of refusing to go along with the mandate. I can't even absolve myself of the consequences. So anyway, I know I keep going back and forth in the story because I'm terrible at telling stories. So when you formally refuse, so the point is that I had soldiers who wanted to refuse. They're showing up to their company commander. Company commander's ordering them to go take the shots. Some of them are holding out, most of them are not. And but for me, as a battalion commander, I'm not going to go get ordered to take the shot from a company commander. I got to go to my next higher commander, which is the brigade commander. So I go see Colonel Fedorovich. Colonel Fedorovich says, go take the shots. Of course, I refuse. And he knows I'm going to refuse. This is a formality. In fact, it was almost kind of tongue in cheek where he was like, okay, go take the shot. He kind of said it like that. I go watch that dumb video. I go right back to him. I'm still a refusal. He's like, okay, go take the shot. I go see some captain who works in the brigade surgeon's office. I talk to him. He can't answer any of my questions. Not that I expected that he would, right? And then anyway, so this is where it gets super weird. So in my battalion, we're back at Fort Campbell. In my battalion, we are gathering the packets for each soldier who is still a refusal from the shot. Now, in the Army, you're constantly gathering information to pass to your higher headquarters. That is not unusual. And sometimes you're about to miss a deadline and you're scrambling to get this information, because there's a short suspense to pass it up for whatever reason. So I'm working late with my staff, and my company's trying to get information from my companies to my staff, get them compiled, get them to the brigade. And so it's very weird how I'm like, kind of cracking the whip on my staff to get this information to pass to brigade to meet their timeline. And I say cracking the whip. I mean, not like aggressively or anything, but just, doing my part as the commander to ensure that we are doing everything we can to get this information to brigade as quickly as possible, because they gotta pass it up. And so I am doing right by my brigade commander and getting him the information that he needs. But at the same time, it's kind of like, this is kind of the final thing that I'm doing as a battalion commander, because I'm getting ready to get pulled out. Now, I don't necessarily know that I'm about ready to get pulled out, though I obviously have a very good idea. But it was weird because I'm passing up all this information about the refusals, through my staff to his staff. And, you know, my name is on that list. I mean, I'm one of the refusals. So the brigade commander texts me. This is Colonel Fedorovich. He texts me, "Hey, Brad, hey, I got your battalion's packets for religious accommodation requests. Where is yours?" And so, you know, I receive that text and I think about it for a moment. And then I'm like, okay, all right, let me think how to respond. Anyway, so I text him something back that's like, "Hey, sir, I was going to do one. I even started to do the paperwork and then I decided against it. And I decided that I am against this and think it should be rescinded, you know, in wholesale. And I'm not looking for an exception for myself." Something along those lines, right? If I say I'm against this, it's because I'm against it, and I'm not just, you know, looking for an exception. Anyway, I text that back to him, and he actually responds, and he's like, I get it, I respect that. And so there are those little interactions with Colonel Fedorovich that I will always be appreciative of, you know, even now. And I would tell him if I had a chance to talk to him. So anyway, so it's Friday, October 22nd. And it's morning time. I don't remember what time. Let's just say 9 o'clock. I don't remember exactly what time, but it's in the morning. And I get a text. "Hey, Brad, this is from Colonel Fedorovich. I've been told to suspend you today," meaning I've been told to, you know, pull you out of command today. Now, I knew that this could happen anytime, you know, and I would tell kind of my second in command, who's called the executive officer. He's a major, real good officer, you know. I mean, I had great guys. I had great guys that worked right around me. The command sergeant major, the executive officer, my operations officer, just fantastic people. But I've been kind of telling them like, "Hey guys, I don't necessarily expect to be in command much longer." And my executive officer, we call that position the XO. He'd always be like, "Nah, sir, you're good. You're gonna be good. You're gonna be good, sir." So anyway, and I'm like, "No, man, I really don't think I'm gonna be in command much longer. We have to prepare for the eventuality that I might not be here in command very soon." So I get this text. I'm like looking at the phone, right? "Brad, I've been told I got to suspend you from command today," or whatever it said, something like that, right? And I'm like, "Well, okay, well, what the hell does that mean? Does like, am I suspended as of right now as I read the text? Like, upon reading this text, you are hereby suspended. So am I suspended like time now or what?" So I text him back. So a day or two before, it's a Friday, a day or two before, I had told my operations officer and the executive officer and the command sergeant major, I want to hold a battalion formation on Friday. And we would, you know, occasionally, you know, every couple of weeks, we would hold a very loose, informal formation right out front of battalion headquarters. We had this big field. There was this tree there. And so we'd hold a quick formation, and then I would bring everybody over, and we would just kind of stand around the tree, like in a big semicircle or a circle around me or whatever, you know. And I would just kind of informally put out some notes to the group, maybe ask them, let them ask a couple of questions or whatever. And we did this a couple of times, and it was good, right? Um, so I tell, you know, my battalion command sergeant major and the operations officer, I think I was like, "Hey, I want to hold a battalion formation on Friday afternoon before we release everybody, because I'm going to tell the battalion, I don't think I'm going to be in command much longer." Now, this would not be a surprise to the battalion because everybody in my battalion knew my position on this, right? So Friday morning, I get this text. So I'm kind of holding the phone in my hand thinking, okay, how do I respond to this, right? So so I respond to the text and I say something like, hey sir, got it. Can you give me till the end of the day? I was going to hold a battalion formation today to kind of inform the battalion that I didn't think I was going to be here much longer and almost like say goodbye. And then, but also, you know, if you give me till the end of the day, I can at least take the day to kind of like take everything that I'm doing, all my command duties, and then hand them over to the command sergeant major, the executive officer, and the operations officer, you know? So at least give me the next couple hours to at least finish the day. And he says, yep, do what you got to do. Just, come see me after you talk with your battalion. So sometimes on Fridays, if there's not a lot going on, we would let the battalion go a little bit early. This is a division-wide policy, not just my policy. So typically at 1500 or 3 p.m., if you get everything done, you being in the Army is already such an all-encompassing job that if you can give a little bit of time back on the weekend, you will. So there was a division-wide policy, and other divisions have very similar policies, right? But you'd release everybody at 3 p.m. on Friday. So we were going to hold a formation at 2 or 2:30. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. But anyway, we held a formation a little bit before that. So, it's early Friday afternoon. We hold a formation. Everybody comes around, and I tell the battalion, like, hey guys, this is it. This is it. I've really enjoyed being your commander the last 4.5 months. I knew this might come, and now it's here. I am literally leaving this formation right now to go over to the brigade commander's office to get relieved. It is what it is. It has been the honor of my career to be your commander, and it is what it is. I don't remember exactly what I said, but anyway, a couple guys come up to me, shake my hand, whatever. I go over to the brigade commander's office. The brigade commander is seated in there with the lawyer. It's very informal. Colonel Fedorovich, this is one of the reasons why I really like him. I mean, he's not a big protocol guy. He's not a big, like, hey, worship my rank kind of guy. So in that regard, he was pretty cool. I mean, notwithstanding that I was being relieved of command and that this would then, end my career, right? And we didn't necessarily know that it was going to end my career. I mean, Fedorovich probably didn't think I was going to resign. I didn't know then that I was going to resign, but I walk in. So Colonel Fedorovich is seated at his table. He's got the lawyer, the brigade lawyer, who's a major, next to him. I'm a lieutenant colonel, which means, I outrank the brigade lawyer. Not that that matters, but I'm just kind of painting a picture for those who don't understand kind of the dynamics as to how this works. The brigade lawyer was a great guy. I don't have any personal issues with him, other than he's a coward, just like all these other lawyers in the military, because, unless there's something I don't know about some of these guys, but all of them told their commanders to go along with, this op that I believe was treasonous, and I believe that it was deliberately treasonous. At least at the top. I'm not accusing everyone who went along of treason, but I think the plot itself was developed with treasonous intent. I'm not saying everybody who went along with it is treasonous, but they were going along with treason if they didn't necessarily know that. And they certainly haven't come out and changed their mind since then, despite all the new information that has come out. They're all, cowards. Total cowards. Turn their back on the Constitution, turn their back on their country. I absolutely agree with that. They've been a part of destroying, the strategic and moral readiness of the military. Like, that is all true. I'm not going to apologize for saying any of that. So I go in, I sit down. We have a super informal, kind of lighthearted discussion. We're kind of in there, like, kind of jovial. Not because it's a laughing matter, but just almost kind of at the sheer absurdity that, like, we can't believe that here we are. But at the end of the day, I do get relieved. So I'm in there, we're kind of talking, and I'm like, hey, sir, it's Friday afternoon. Like, Monday morning, when I come to work, where do I go? I can't go back to the battalion. And I told him it's Friday. Okay, here's I knew I was on such borrowed time when I took command. I never set up my office. So most battalion commanders, when you go in their office, it's like like a shrine to themselves. I'm not even necessarily saying that's a bad thing. It's kind of cool to go into a senior officer's office and kind of seeing what they've done and where they've been. And to some degree, you can get a sense of who they are, but also like if you're a junior officer, to some degree, you can think to yourself, if I stay in and do well, I can achieve some of this too. So there's this thought that like all military officers, especially the more senior ones, are super conceited. That is not true. So I know sometimes because I condemn them all for what they've done, and I do, but many of them are good people that are now involved in some very bad stuff, indirectly or directly. And they do not have the moral integrity or the courage to get themselves out of it. That's true. They are not bad people. Now, some of them are very conceited, but I will tell you, the senior officers that I worked for, they were good people. They were good people, and when you would talk to them kind of behind closed doors, they were just normal guys. And some of them were, it's not like they forgot that they were just normal guys. They were normal guys who just happened to be generals or whatever, but they were normal guys. So what I'm telling you is what they've done and the cowardice that they have shown the last couple of years is not because of who they were to get to the rank that they are. No, it's in spite of who they are to get to the rank they are. Now we do have a huge problem for sure. Like there's a problem we got to figure out. But the problem is so there's a huge problem in our military, but there's also a huge problem in our society. Most of society was hoodwinked, not just the military, but the military has an added challenge in that they've been taught to go along with the system, even though military officers are very smart people, and like senior military officers, they're very, very smart. They just can't think outside of that, that dialectical trap that they're in. Anyway, so I asked Colonel Fedorovich, this is the afternoon of October 22nd. I've just been suspended at command. Hey, where do I show up to work on Monday? He's like, don't, just lay low and we'll figure it out. We'll tell you where to go. Anyway, I go home for what ends up being 2 weeks. I don't go to work. 2 weeks, free vacation. And I text him every couple of days, like, hey, sir, I'm just kind of sitting at the house. Like, hey, just wait. We'll contact you. We'll figure out where you're going to go. Anyway, eventually I go the only place I can go, which is division staff. I mean, where do you hide a battalion commander that you just fired? You got to put him on division staff with all the other lieutenant colonels. So I go to division staff. So now I'm working on the staff of the division commander. Now here's where it gets crazy. And this is why I have very mixed opinions about JP McGee. So Colonel Fedorovich suspends me of command on October 22nd. That's not being relieved of command. That's, hey, we're suspending you of command. And then you can write a memo of any extenuating circumstances as to why you shouldn't be relieved of command. And oh, by the way, here is your letter of reprimand. So I wrote a rebuttal to the letter of reprimand, which I don't like. I had a lawyer that they told me to go see, and he was helpful, but I wrote a pretty strong rebuttal. It's been a while since I've read it. I don't remember what it said, but I wrote a pretty strong rebuttal, and he kind of had me soften it a bit, and I did. I wish I had not. I did. I submitted it. Of course, it didn't matter. Nobody cared. I still got the letter of reprimand, which is why I should have just wrote a stronger rebuttal anyway. I kind of regret softening the tone of it. And then I got, so 6 days later, so I think I was supposed to, I could write a rebuttal to the suspension. I think I'm remembering this correctly. And I don't think I did. I might be remembering that correctly. Anyway, so I wrote a rebuttal to the letter of reprimand. I didn't write a rebuttal to the suspension. Anyway, so I got suspended at command, and then so I was suspended from command on the 28th of October. So 6 days later. But I didn't find out about it until November 15th. So if you do some quick math, that's 18 days after I had been formally relieved. So now we were all in the field, myself included, the whole division's in the field. I understand that. But nowadays in the field, it's still pretty easy to, send emails and push documents. And oh, by the way, I was working in the the division main, like, tactical operations center where the general himself works, the division commander. I'm on his staff, which is also weird because he sees me in his division main tactical operations center, what we call the TOC, or the division main. But he sees me one day in there after I've just shown up, and now I work on his staff because I've been pulled out of my battalion. He's like, "Hey, Brad, what's up?" Comes up and shakes my hand, and I'm like, "Hey, sir," and he's like, "How you doing?" And I'm like, "Great." Just like a weird conversation, right? But I mean, he did greet me, by name. I mean, he knew my first name. Anyway, yeah, it's a little bit weird. And then, so I get relieved. So there's a memo that he signs on October 28th, formally relieving me of command. And I don't get it till November 18th. And I get it via email, and I get it from the major lawyer who is he's the brigade JAG, so the Judge Advocate General. So he's the brigade lawyer. So he's the lawyer for the brigade commander, and he's a major. So I've been relieved of command by the division commander, but I don't get relieved in person. And I remember when I got suspended by the brigade commander, I remember thinking to myself, okay, I know a brigade commander cannot relieve a battalion commander of command. It's got to be the division commander. So I'm being suspended by the brigade commander because I'll be formally relieved by the division commander. That's what I thought in my mind. So then when I never get called to go see the division commander in his office and get relieved in person, I'm just kind of like, okay. Then I get notified of my relief via email, and I don't even get notified by a commander. I get notified by the lawyer, who's a major, and I'm a lieutenant colonel. Now, I'm not here to get all tied up about rank. And this lawyer was a good dude, nothing against him. But that's not how things work. Like, I'm a lieutenant colonel. I shouldn't be getting notified by a major who's a staff officer and not a commander. So if I can't be notified that I've been relieved by the man who's relieving me, which is a completely cowardly move. So in that regard, I do consider, Major General J.P. McGee to have acted in a cowardly manner towards me. And I would, if I had the chance, I would tell him that. Now, do I believe he's a coward because of just going along with this thing in general? Yes. But on top of that, I believe that he acted towards me in a cowardly manner. So I see Colonel Fedorovich come through the division main later, and I'm like, "Hey, sir, what's up with this whole, I get notified of my relief from command from your lawyer, And I ask him, when we all get out of the field, can I come see you? And he's like, "Yeah, come see me." So I go see Colonel Fedorovich once we get out of the field. My former brigade commander, who I don't work for now because I'm no longer in battalion command. I don't work for him. But I go see him, and he happily sees me. And I'm like, "Hey, sir, how come I didn't get relieved in person by the division commander? How come, General McGee wouldn't relieve me in person? And how come it took 18 days for me to get a memo that could have been, if they're gonna notify me by email, then I mean, I should have been notified within 24 hours of that memo having been written, not 18 days later." Anyway, whatever. I don't get much of an answer from Fedorovich, but I'm asking him to answer for McGee. And I mean, what's he going to be able to say, right? So, but there are two things where I got to give, if I'm going to give a full account, there are two kind of cool moments that I had with McGee, So I've already been relieved by General McGee, right? Not in person, but I'm out of command, and we're in the field, and we're in a meeting in his tent. In this big tent, big meeting tent, there's a meeting going on. I don't remember what kind of meeting, it doesn't matter. And he's planning something for the division, and he kind of asks the staff, his staff that's in there, he kind of asks, kind of to himself, but kind of out loud, hey, I wonder what the battalion commanders will think about this. And then he looks over to his, what's called the G3, his operations officer, who's a senior lieutenant colonel who had just come out of battalion command, who I kind of work for, in all honesty, now in this new position that I'm in. That guy's name is Joe. Joe's a terrific guy. All things considered, do I blame Joe for being a coward just like the rest of them with all this that's going on? Yes, of course. But with me, Joe was good, a good dude. So, and obviously General McGee chose Joe when he came out of battalion command to be his division operations officer. So, he trusts Joe a lot. Joe's was probably one of his top battalion commanders. And now he's in this position now that he's out of command. So General McGee looks to Joe and says, Joe, what would you think if you were a battalion commander and, we were to implement whatever it is that we were talking about? And Joe gives him whatever answer. No. Hold on. Let me back up a step. General McGee, before he asks Joe that question, says, well, I got two former battalion commanders in here, kind of saying like, let me get you guys' opinion. Joe. And then Joe tells him whatever. I don't remember what we were talking about, so I can't remember exactly what Joe said. But anyway, where I am seated, I'm kind of seated diagonally behind Joe. So where the general is seated, as he's looking at Joe, he's kind of also looking at me, right? And then he says, what about you? What do you think? And he's asking me, and I don't realize that he's talking to me. And he's like, and when he realizes that I don't know that he's addressing me, he's like, Brad, what do you think? And I'm dumbfounded. And the reason that I'm dumbfounded is because he's asking me a question as a former battalion commander, as if I had like finished out my entire command and had served, honorably. And he's lumping me in with people like Joe, who I know he thinks super highly of, and somebody who did really well. So anyway, I answered the question or whatever, but I thought that was a cool moment because I thought he was, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but he didn't have to ask me. He could have just asked Joe. He didn't have to ask Joe and me. And I felt like he was kind of giving me my due. Like, hey, you were a battalion commander. You made a decision that caused you to get pulled out of. This is me trying to think what he's thinking. You made a decision that caused you to get pulled out of battalion command, but you didn't get relieved for some crazy infraction that you committed or, whatever. You, and under normal circumstances, you wouldn't have been relieved, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. Anyway, I thought it was a cool moment. I thought he was kind of, giving me some credit and speaking to me as if I had been like a battalion commander who had, served my full command, et cetera. Anyway, I thought it was a cool moment. So if I'm going to tell the whole story, I gotta share the moments where I thought General McGee was cool with me too. And then there's another moment where General McGee was cool with me. So General McGee, so he had a shadow program where if you were a new battalion commander, you had to shadow him for a week. And so you'd come up out of your battalion, you'd go hang out with him. You go to all the meetings that he goes to, see how he interacts with his staff, with the brigade commanders. And then he would have these meetings with just himself and the couple of battalion commanders that he would have shadowing, him that week, right? So we do the shadow program in August. It was either right before or right after the mandate came out. I think right before. I want to say like the first or second week in August. It is like right before the mandate. So we do the shadow program. Everyone knows I'm unvaxxed. He knows I'm unvaxxed. I'm wearing a mask. I mean, it's just, ridiculous. And in preparation for the shadow program, there are 4 battalion commanders that are going to be shadowing him that week. It's Monday of the week that we're supposed to shadow him. So, there was a worksheet that we each got that the week before, and we had to fill it out and then send it up. And he's going to consult it as he has like a one-on-one talk with each of us. So you go through, it's pretty typical. I mean, there's some cool questions on there that I thought were pretty insightful for a division commander to ask his battalion commanders. It was like, there were questions like, hey, what are your overall goals for the Army? Like, what are you're already a battalion commander, you're super successful, up to this point, but what are your end goals? But the ones that I thought were really insightful were, he asked a question like, where do you see yourself amid your peers? Do you see yourself among the best with your peers? Do you see yourself, where do you see yourself? And so I said, I answered that question something like, if I consider my peer group to be all lieutenant colonels in the Army, then I think I'm among the best. If I consider my peer group to be battalion commanders within the 101st Airborne Division, then I think I'm in the middle. I think I'm better than others at some things, and I think, some people are better than me at some things. My point being, hey, when you've already got this super selective group of battalion commanders in the 101st, I'm not here to tell you, I'm your best battalion commander. I'm happy enough just to be a battalion commander in the 101st. Anyway, but I thought that was a cool question. Kind of forces you to be very introspective. One of the questions was, what do you want your next 3 assignments to be, et cetera. Pretty typical stuff that you might get asked by your boss in preparation for a talk, like for a one-on-one chat. But then there was a question at the bottom where he said, is there anything else that you would like to discuss? Open-ended question. So I wrote something like, in the spirit of transparency, I just want to say up front that I am unvaccinated. I don't plan to take it. I'm very clear-eyed in my assessment as to what this might portend for my career. I mean, that's like almost verbatim what I wrote. So, there are 4 battalion commanders that are shadowing the general, and 2 are supposed to have their one-on-one chats with him Monday morning, and then 2 on Tuesday morning. And I'm scheduled for Tuesday morning. So on Monday morning, we're supposed to show up and do PT with the general. So PT is physical training. So real easy. We show up with the general. Now, General McGee's a fit guy. For a 2-star that's in his, early 50s or whatever, but, very fit guy. So we're supposed to go for a run with the general. So there were 4 of us. So what we did was, we just did like a 4-mile run. And then what you would do is we basically ran in like two files. So 2 little lines. And since there were 4 of us, we ran 4 miles and, just at a pretty easy pace, nothing crazy. And then each mile, one of the battalion commanders that's part of that shadow program would run right beside General McGee, and you just chat with him while we're just kind of, all running along at a, just not a crazy clip or anything. And so I just happened to be 4th where we were just kind of in those lines, just, rotating in and out each mile. And so the 4th mile I'm running with a General McGee, and nothing but small talk. just, oh, hey, where are you from? Where were you stationed before you got here? Just total small talk. So we finished the run and we're all kind of walking back up to the headquarters building. And I'm still kind of beside him because I just happened to be the last one to run beside him when we finished the run. I ran the 4th mile. So we're walking up and he and I are still talking. Nothing but small talk, just a chat. After we finish this run, these aides come out and they're like, "Hey, Lieutenant Colonel Miller, you're gonna we know you were scheduled for tomorrow, but you're actually going to do your one-on-one chat with General McGee today." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I think like, okay, he doesn't even want to wait till tomorrow to talk to me. He wants to talk to me today. And I just assumed it was about the vax thing. That's why he was moving mine up one day. So, I go shower, change real quick, and then I meet him. I go into his office. It's like 8:30 or whatever in the morning. And it's just he and he's got that sheet that I had filled out, right? So we talk about all the stuff at the top of the sheet, just like a normal conversation about, the way a division commander would talk to a battalion commander about the battalion commander's goals and how he sees himself. But it's kind of an artificial conversation because of the situation that I'm in, right? But whatever, we play the game. I tell him what my goals are, what I'd like for my next couple of jobs, speaking as if this mandate and what's going to happen with it is not a thing. And I do believe that it's early August. So I think technically the mandate is not in effect yet. Regardless, the conversation is a little artificial. He gets down to the bottom of the sheet and he tells me, okay, he's like, I saw this. Like I've already seen this. I read this before. But I did not want to start our conversation talking about this because it would have dominated our entire conversation. Now, I don't necessarily like to share what me and somebody else talk about, behind closed doors. I'm sharing this because it actually paints General McGee in a good light. So when I call him a coward, when I say, he's also a coward for not relieving me in person, I stand by those things. But again, I'm trying to tell the full story and paint a full picture of my interaction with him. And behind closed doors during that conversation, he was cool with me. And I will give him credit for that. And I'm appreciative of that. And I'm appreciative that he basically was saying, I wanted to get to know you, division commander to battalion commander, before we just talk about this, I thought that was cool. So anyway, he's like, he says, hey, if you go through with this, you're going to be out of the Army very soon. And he told me this is August. He told me I'd be out of the Army by Christmas. Now that didn't happen. And he's making it sound like the Army was going to push me out that quickly. That clearly didn't happen. I didn't get out till the following September, 9 months later. And that's because I resigned. So he was way off on that. But regardless, he said, the Army may try to push you out very, very quickly. That was his point, He was just off on the timeline. And but he did right by me because he said, do you realize what you're going to be giving up? And he basically spelled out for me in terms of benefits and retirement pension, everything that I'd be giving up. And I'm appreciative of that. Not that he was trying to woo me with the money or whatever. But I felt like he was trying to do his due diligence with one of his subordinates in saying, just make sure you understand what you're doing. Whichever route you decide to go, just make sure you're fully informed. I get that. I felt like that's what I was doing with my battalion when I had meetings with all my unvaxxed populations by each of the 7 companies in my battalion and telling them, guys, I'm not here to tell you what to do. But whatever you're going to do, just understand the writing is on the wall and you need to have a plan. So if this mandate drops tomorrow, make sure you know what you're going to do. You got to have a plan. And I'm not here to tell you whether to go along with the mandate or not, but just have a plan. And I would tell them when I would meet with my subordinates in these groups, I'm not having this meeting with you because I'm also unvaccinated. I'm just telling you this as your battalion commander. I'm trying to do right by you guys. It's not that I'm also unvaccinated and therefore I have this special sense of solidarity with you. Maybe I do, but that's not necessarily why I'm trying to take care of you as your battalion commander who cares about his subordinates. You know, I'm not trying to throw some coup here, you know, by rallying all the unvaxxed troops behind me. That's, you know, I wasn't, you know, necessarily trying to do that. So anyway, when I would have these conversations with my subordinates, I felt this was very closely akin to what he was doing with me, you know, one of his subordinates, when he's like, hey, if you're going to go through with this and refuse, just understand what you're potentially giving up. Fair enough. Now I told him, I was like, I got it. I do understand. You know, I'm fully aware, but I appreciate you ensuring that I'm fully informed. I get it. I think you have a duty to do that, and I appreciate you taking that duty seriously. So all good, you know. So he says to me, you don't have to go through the remainder of the shadow program. You don't have to stay here all week and shadow me. You can go back to your battalion. And I thought that was cool too, because he's like, hey, he's basically saying, you're you're not going to be in command much longer. So going through the shadow program is not super useful. And maybe you should take advantage of being with your battalion while you can. That's kind of what he was saying in like a cool way. That's how I interpreted it. And he goes, but if you want to go through the shadow program, you can. And I said, okay, I appreciate you giving me that option. Can I go through the shadow program today, make the decision, and then at the end of today, I'll inform you as to whether or not I just want to go back to my battalion or whether I want to continue with the shadow program. And he said, sure. And I said, okay. So I went through the remainder of the shadow program, and then, so I went to all the meetings with him. And then at the end of the afternoon, he had a meeting with just the four of us battalion commanders doing the shadow program with him that week and himself. So just the four of us and him in his office. And he was just kind of going through some things he had learned throughout his, 30-year career. He was super cool with us. Told us some cool stories, just super cool. Just, him and the four of us, a cool guy. Well, we finished, we're done for the day. The other three guys step out and I kind of hang out and I say, hey, sir, if the offer still stands, I'm just going to go back to my battalion for the remainder of the week. And he's like, yeah. He's like, no problem. And then he said to me, did anything this morning that I said to you change your mind? And I said, no, sir. And he said, okay. So I left, and I did not participate in the remainder of the shadow program, but I felt that was a positive interaction. So there are these moments of what I thought were cool interactions that I had with General McGee. General McGee came to see my battalion when we were when he came to visit us down at Fort Polk when we were going through our training scenario, and he was kind of beat me up because my battalion was behind on our timeline for the support we were providing during this big like super complex training scenario. And that's fine. That's like what a division commander should be doing with his battalion commanders. But when he came and talked to me for like 10 minutes or whatever, nothing about the vax came up at all. It was all just like talking business, and that was cool. That was fine, no problem. Yeah, so I had these like interactions with him that were positive, but the fact that he didn't relieve me in person, that I'm just not gonna I don't want to say I'm not going to forgive him for it. That's too strong a term, but like, that was wrong. That was cowardly. And then, now the division headquarters was prepping to deploy to Eastern Europe. That's true. As I'm now, so fast forward to like July, August of 2022. I'm like literally leaving the army. And the division headquarters deployed. He's in Eastern Europe. And I am supposed to do basically an exit interview with him before I leave the army. And it's going to have to be via VTC because he's deployed. And I was looking forward to it because one thing that I had not done that I regret is I had not strongly told him, sir, this is unlawful. I wasn't going to go along with it, but I had not strongly told him that. And part of that is because I didn't necessarily know that when I left command. When I got relieved to command, the reason that I refused was not so much because listen, I thought it was unconstitutional and I thought the whole thing was a treasonous plot. That's true. And I never believed the COVID narrative, but I didn't know about the specific community, shell game with the FDA approval, vice the EUA products. I didn't know about that until I was already out of command. I probably found out about that closer to the end of 2021, maybe towards the end of the year. So, 2 months after I'd already been relieved. And the reason that I think I didn't know about that is because September, when a lot of that stuff was coming out, when like Dr. Terry Adram's memo came out, I was in Louisiana, like almost completely disconnected from the news and everything, going through this like super stressful training scenario. And for 2 of those weeks that you're quote unquote in the box, going through these simulated combat exercises, or simulated combat scenario exercises, you're actually not even supposed to have your cell phone on. So you're like almost completely cut off from information, So anyway, my point being, I didn't even know about that stuff. So the community bait and switch, that did not play into my decision to refuse the vax, which is kind of crazy because it means even without knowing that, I refused the vax anyway. So, I really don't know what else there is to tell with the story, but anyway, I was supposed to do this exit interview as I was leaving the army, and it got rescheduled, and then it got canceled again, and then it just never happened. And I never knew if that's because he was blowing me off or whatever. But in any case, he knew I was leaving the army. He knew he could have made time to interview me. He never did. But I kind of regret the fact that I didn't pursue him before he left in order to kind of tell him like, hey, sir, this thing is completely unlawful. I regret that. I told him it was bad news. I told him I didn't agree with it, but I never said to him, this is unlawful. This is a bait and switch. We are misrepresenting EUA products as if they are FDA approved. I never said that. And I never said that to Fedorovich. So as I was leaving the army, I reached out to Fedorovich and I was like, hey, can I come see you? Because I wanted to tell him the same thing. And he responded to my text, but he wasn't super receptive about me coming to see him. And why would he be? I mean, I don't work for him anymore. So anyway, whatever. So that's kind of the story as to how I lost my command, on the 22nd of October when I got suspended. 6 days later, got relieved. No, I don't want to go back in the army. No, there's not a single colonel or general in the army that I want to work for right now. Not a single one. I don't trust any of them. And now we see what's going on right now. And no, I don't trust them to do the right thing. And it's not because I think they're all bad guys. I think they're good guys, good guys. But I think they're weak. I think they're I don't think they have a lot of integrity. I don't think they understand how the world works. I think they've allowed themselves to get duped. Their careers depend on them maintaining this mindset, and they're just, they're not going to question it. This is way longer than I intended for it to be, but a lot of this stuff I had never shared before in detail. Just, I'd never had a reason to. So I figured I would tell the story today, and then, in typical fashion, I just took a lot longer to share it than I thought I would. But maybe you'll find it interesting, and we'll see. And last note, this is important. So this isn't about me or me showcasing what I did. And maybe people think that sometimes. I share my story because it's indicative of what happened to many people, and it's indicative of what happened to our military writ large, and it's indicative of what happened to our country, and is still happening. It's still ongoing. None of these problems have been fixed. I share my story because it's the one that I'm most familiar with. But I'm not here to tell you that I gave up more than any other people. There are people out there who took the shots because they felt coerced, and they knew they were bad. They knew they were bad, but they had to take them because if they were to lose their military career, they would lose some of the benefits that their children receive. And they might, some of these individuals have children who have particular handicaps or problems that their military benefits pay for, that they couldn't pay for, if they weren't in the military. So they couldn't give that up. And I'm not here to judge them for that. That's just a very special set of circumstances that I've heard from some individuals, but I know other individuals who maybe were not in that specific set of circumstances, but they knew the shots were bad news, but for other reasons just felt that they could not give up their careers because they're single parents or whatever. And, maybe I agree or don't agree with their decision, but more importantly, I hate the fact that they were backed into that corner, that they were even placed in that position. And my point in sharing that is there were people who knew the shots were bad news and still, felt compelled to take them. And I hate that because they were smart enough to know these things are bad news and still compelled to go forward with it. Again, I just share my story because it's the one I'm the most familiar with because it happened to me. Not because I think I'm some shining example of, whatever. I just want to bring attention to what's happened to the military as a whole. And now we see what's happening. And I don't trust our government's leaders. I don't trust the senior military leadership to do the right thing, to say the right thing. I don't trust them at all. And no, I don't trust that they have the interests of the nation at heart. And no, I don't trust that they have the best interests of the military at heart. They certainly don't care about the Constitution, and I don't think they care about the security of the nation or our freedoms or American ideals or our traditional ethos either. And so, if by sharing my story, everything I do is not because I think I'm some great person. It's just I feel duty bound to add my small drop to the ocean of those who are trying to stand up and do the right thing. That's it. And with that said, I'll go ahead and close this out. So thanks for listening.